It's that time of the month again where I answer your questions, so let's get into them. Alright, so the first question is, Ryzen 4000 laptop won't be released until mid-August or July or maybe June. Should I wait for it or buy i7 9th gen or maybe i7 10750H series laptop? In the end, it comes down to whether or not you need something right now or you're happy to wait and see what comes along. At the same time, you don't want to fall into the trap of constantly waiting. There's always going to be something new just around the corner. So if you need something now, I'd say buy now based on the information available and what products are, around in your country that you can afford that do what you need. Otherwise, I think a lot of the new Intel laptops are coming out sort of May period, but yeah, it depends on region, what country you're in. You don't actually specify here, but yeah, in the end, it comes down to whether or not you want something now or you want to wait and see what happens. In terms of gaming performance with Ryzen versus Intel, I haven't had a chance to test that fairly myself, but from what I've seen, it doesn't actually look like it's going to be too big of a difference. Outside of gaming though, it looks like Ryzen 4000 is a pretty clear winner all around when it comes to multi-core and even single-core performance. So yeah, it also depends on what you want to use it for and whether or not you want to wait. Reveal your face, please. The next question, is repasting laptop worth it? How often should I change thermal paste in my laptop? So I don't actually have a good answer to that, but what I would personally do is I would just monitor the temperatures and over time see if that changes. So maybe after 6 months, 12 months, if I'm starting to see significantly higher temperatures, then I might start to think I should probably, swap the paste. But other than that, it depends on the paste quality. If you used a terrible paste and it's dried up fast, then you might need to replace it sooner than a higher quality paste. So there are definitely variables, but in the end, I would just look at the thermals that your machine's actually producing, and I'd decide based on that whether or not I wanted to change it or not. Why aren't we seeing any Nvidia Super Max-P powered laptops? All we got is Max-Q models so far. So I'm not sure if this is a question about paired with Intel or Ryzen. I guess at the moment, there isn't really any now that I think about it. So yeah, good point. Don't really know. From what I've seen, a lot of companies like ASUS and MSI, I think they're targeting May. That could change, virus issues and all that. But yeah, not actually sure where they are. I don't currently have any. Everything I've got so far has been Max-Q. So I don't actually know where they are. Hopefully they turn up soon because I really want to compare them and see how much Super actually matters compared to last gen. When could we expect a Lenovo 5i review, and do you think it's going to be a big performance boost compared to the Wi-Fi 40? Well, Lenovo have already announced that they're bringing out those new models, including the 5i, in May, so I'm waiting for that at the moment. I have been in contact with them, and I've asked if I could get a model in advance to do the review and, publish the review day one sort of thing, but unfortunately it doesn't seem like that's going to be possible, so what I have to wait for is until they start actually shipping those laptops out from the factory to customers. I think that's as soon as they're going to be able to get one to send to me. If that doesn't happen, I'll probably just end up buying them myself. I mean, I've done that with the L340, the Wi-Fi 40, the Wi-Fi 30, and the Y7000. I mean, fact is, Lenovo laptops are just cheap in my region, and a lot of you want to see them. So if they're not going to send them to me, I'm probably just going to buy them anyway. As for a big performance boost, my guess is probably not. I mean, it depends mostly on the changes with the GPU. So, there are all those things that Nvidia said, like dynamic boost, more power efficient memory, that kind of thing. So those will probably add some improvement. But at the same time, I don't think the Intel side of things is really going to offer as much of a change compared to 9th gen CPUs. Haven't really tested that out fairly yet, but I don't think it's going to be, anything too crazy there on that side of things at least. There is, of course, features like Advanced Optimus that's meant to be in the 5i. I don't think that will affect performance because most of the Lenovo gaming laptops like the Wi-Fi 40 or Y740, they already give you the option to disable Optimus, which gives you that same speed boost. I mean, Advanced Optimus is obviously taking things to the next level and it's a much nicer feature. But yeah, I don't expect that to really give a performance boost. Are the upcoming laptops more worth it than build a PC with the same budget? So laptop versus PC, I think it's always pretty much going to come down to whether or not you need portability or you don't. If you need portability, then go a laptop. If you don't need portability, well, I'd probably look at buying a PC instead. Generally, not always, but you can get more performance per dollar. It's not always the case, but there are definitely other factors into this, but to me, it comes down to whether or not you need portability or not. As for whether or not the upcoming laptops are more worth it, I don't think there's that big of a jump compared to last gen, especially on the Intel side. It seems pretty small. On the AMD side, there is a much larger jump from 3000 series to 4000 series, but at the same time, AMD on the desktop are doing quite well there. You can get up to the 3950X with 16 cores, so you're not exactly limited. So I don't think it really is. I don't think the new stuff changes it that much. ASUS TUF A15 and A17 when? And why the system crash when lowering the settings in demanding games, HS series. So from what I've seen, a lot of retailers here in Australia are going to start selling the A15 and A17 on the 1st of May, I think it was. Now, I was planning on buying one, but Tim from Hardware Unboxed actually imported one from the US, and he's been reviewing that at the moment. And he's actually been nice enough to send that over to me. He hasn't sent it yet because he's still testing it, but once he's done with it, I should be able to get it, and I should be able to do my full review and game benchmarks and thermal testing, all that sort of stuff. So just waiting for that to get sent from him. As for the system crash, I'm not sure what exactly that's referring to. Is that a common problem with the A15? If I experience it during my testing, I'll definitely point it out, but I haven't heard of that so far myself. I was thinking if Ryzen 4000 is a CPU that can handle heavy usage for a long time. In other words, is it a CPU that I can count on for the next 5 years? 5 years is a long time, and I really hate the future-proof term, but it depends what you're doing. If it's multi-core performance, the fact is the Ryzen options are offering excellent performance for the money today. So, when comparing to what's available out there, you could spend a lot more money to get a comparable Intel system with up to 8 cores, or you can spend less to get a 4900HS, which will, perform better, use less power. All the things I pointed out in my 4900HS versus 10875H comparison video. So whichever one of those you go for, I don't think there's going to be that big of a difference one way or the other. Years from now, it probably depends more on just how much you want to spend today. So I think you could spend less on a Ryzen 4000 laptop today compared to a more expensive Intel system, and I'd probably expect them to last similar amount in terms of longevity, at least in terms of the CPU, because the Intel-based laptops are currently paired with more powerful GPUs. So it depends what you're doing. If you're gaming, you might want that more powerful GPU, so you might want to spend more money to get the Intel system. Or you might want to wait until Ryzen 4000 is available with more powerful GPUs, whenever that is. But yeah, it's really hard to predict this sort of stuff, but I would say an 8-core Ryzen 4000 series CPU probably has a pretty good shot of getting you through 5 years. When is the second wave of Intel and AMD laptops coming? Well, not too sure, but I have heard that a lot of companies like ASUS and Lenovo, they're bringing out their models in May, so hopefully around then. I haven't heard too much about new AMD laptops. I think the new MSI Bravo 15 with Ryzen 4000 and possibly 5600M might be coming out late May. There's supposed to be the Dell G5 Special Edition, which was meant to come out in April, but it's almost the end of April now, and I haven't heard any updates on that. They did say that at CES in January before all of the virus issues happened, so I can only assume that's been delayed, but haven't heard anything there yet. But yeah, I think the sort of May timeframe is when we're supposed to see a lot more stuff. But at the same time, it also seems like things are just constantly trickling out over the months, and all sorts of things have been disrupted due to those virus issues I mentioned. So we'll probably just have to wait and see. How much of a performance uplift do you think we can expect from GDDR6 to LPGDDR6 transition in a laptop? So I'm not actually sure what LPGDDR6 is. I had a search for it and there was almost no results in Google, so I'm not sure if that's something that's new or announced, and I haven't heard of it, but I'm going to assume you're talking about the lower powered memory that Nvidia mentioned they're using in their current graphics for laptops. So basically what they said is that if you have an 80 watt max-Q GPU and approximately 20 watts of that will go to the memory. So if you have lower powered memory, then you've got more power available within your power budget to send to the GPU core. And that's going to give you more performance in games. So basically, more efficient memory equals better performance by having more power to push towards the GPU core. Now, they didn't actually say how much of that power is going to go to the GPU core, so they didn't say what sort of improvements the memory is giving them. So we kind of need to like wait and see and test that ourselves. But at the same time, it's going to be hard to test for because they've made other improvements with the new graphics as well, which might slightly change things, like dynamic boost. I mean, I guess we can turn that feature off. But also all of these new Nvidia laptop graphics options are launching at the same time as Intel 10th gen. So we're probably not going to get like a 9th gen laptop paired with the new Nvidia graphics. It's only going to be new Nvidia graphics with Intel 10th gen. And although the difference between 9th gen and 10th gen is probably pretty small, that is still a difference that's going to come into play when we try to test and compare like old last gen, say 2060 versus a new 2060 with the more efficient memory. So I'm interested to try it out, but yeah, just need to get some laptops and hope that I can do a fair comparison. Hey Jared, big fan. Thanks. Is it okay to ask what inspired to make high quality videos? Well, I'm glad you think they're high quality. Honestly, I'm not exactly sure. I guess I always kind of wanted to make like tech reviews. I actually made like a website like more than 10 years ago. I never did anything with it. Like I pretty much just registered the domain and thought, hey, it would be cool to review tech stuff. This was like a long time before, you know, there were like popular YouTube channels doing it. I just thought it'd be interesting because I saw other websites out there doing it, but I never really got into it. And yeah, I guess basically what happened is one night I just couldn't sleep and I was just thinking about it, and I ended up getting out of bed at like 3 a.m., registered the channel name and all that stuff and got it going. And yeah, just ever since then been working on it. It's been good fun. But yeah, I've always wanted to do it pretty much. And YouTube has just been a really good way to pretty much do what I wanted to do a long time ago with the website that I never ended up getting running. And yeah, it's been going good ever since. 4800H versus 3700X laptops. Which one would you prefer and why? So it's hard to say because there's not that many of either at the moment, realistically. I like the idea of a 3700X laptop more, mainly because it's the AM4 socket. So I could put in, you know, potentially a 3900, maybe a 3950X if there's enough power for it. Might have to run it in eco mode, but still could be a good option if you need the multi-core performance. So that would probably be my preference just from an upgradability perspective. And if the laptop OEM supports like BIOS updates in the future for, say, the next gen of Ryzen desktop chips, there's the potential for upgrading there. I mean, it's a bit of an unknown, could be a risk because you have no idea if whoever's making the laptop is going to offer that sort of support down the track. But yeah, that'd be what I would be leaning towards personally. Are Clevo-based laptops reliable? In my experience, yeah, I haven't had any problems with them. The first laptop I ever covered on the channel was the P650RE, I think. And so I was using that at my last job before I went into YouTube full time. And I had been using that thing for 3.5 years, like every day in the office, so 8 hours a day. I didn't turn it off, so it was always on my desk in the office running 24/7. I took it on like international trips, I banged it up. It held up perfectly fine after 3.5 years. So based on my personal experience, I'd say they're pretty reliable. Obviously that could vary by model. Obviously there are definitely, you know, duds with everything. Nothing is perfect. There's always going to be failure rates, that sort of thing. But yeah, in my experience, the unit I had was quite reliable and it lasted very well. TUF A15 review. Well, as mentioned, just waiting for Hardware Unboxed to send that over. What does your personal setup look like when you're not testing laptops? Well, pretty much it's just this room. The only difference is this white table sitting in front of me is kind of pushed up against that wall over there. That's where I film most of my B-roll. That's really pretty much it. Otherwise, I sit right here at my computer. That's where I edit all the videos. Table on the side here is usually a bit of a mess. I usually put like another laptop there that I'm testing. Desktop might be sitting there. I've got another one of these monitors just off screen. I don't think you can see. So second one of them. Got my NAS over here. Bunch of tools and stuff over there that I regularly use for testing. I don't know, maybe I should do a room tour video. Let me know. Is it worth buying RTX 2070 with 10th gen where you're unable to undervolt, or better to get 9th gen on promo much cheaper and lower temps? So that's a good question. I guess it comes down to, well, for me it would come down to whether or not the graphics was, say, 2070 Super, because there's probably going to be a fair improvement due to that. I can't remember off the top of my head if they're still selling non-Super 2070s. I think they might be. It was definitely Max Q. Well, if it's Max Q, it'd probably be Max P as well. All right, let's say, forget the Super, it's just the CPU difference. Personally, I wouldn't care that much about undervolting. I don't actually do it that much myself, mainly because when I'm editing video and it's like 4 a.m. and I've been up all night, like I only take my laptop when I'm at like CES or Computex, that kind of thing, to edit videos. And when it's like 4 a.m. and I've been, busy all day, the last thing I want is my stuff to crash during an export. And, I could tune it and get it stable, but, end of the day, I'm not saving myself that much. I'm not getting that much extra performance in the video exporting side of things, so I don't personally bother with it just because I prefer the stability. So for me, it wouldn't matter. But at the same time, I don't think 10th gen is really offering, that much extra performance. There are also some laptops that do still seem to have undervolting support, like the MSI GS66 back there. So that's a 10th gen laptop, but you can enable XTU through the BIOS or just undervolt it through the BIOS. So you might just have to look at on a case-by-case basis which laptops still do support the feature. Otherwise, I would look at the CPU benchmarks of 9th gen versus 10th gen of what you're getting. If the difference isn't all that much, then yeah, 9th gen laptop, if you can get a good deal, that sounds pretty good to me. Can you make undervolting tutorials for each CPU? Also, GPU undervolt videos would be greatly appreciated by us. It's very informative and interesting in the laptop community. So the reason I haven't done undervolting videos in the past is I just think there are better videos out there available. Like Bob of All Trades does a really good job. Anytime anyone in the comments asks me about undervolting, I just link his videos. He does an excellent job of showing you how to do it and explaining it already. I don't think there's any need to do an undervolting tutorial for each CPU because the general principle is basically the same. Once you know what the settings do in XTU or throttle stop, you can apply that regardless of if it's a 9th gen i7 or 8th gen i5 or whatever. It's basically the same sort of thing. So once you know how to do it, it doesn't matter. And it's not like you're going to get a better undervolt with, say, an i7 or an i5 or some specific laptop. So I don't think there needs to be a guide for a specific laptop or CPU because it varies by chip realistically. So even if I have an i5 and I say, here's how to tune this i5 perfectly, and it works great for me, that might not work for you at all. The undervolt might be way too aggressive, or maybe you could push yours further. So it really varies by hardware. So in the end, you need to work out how to do it at a basic level, which again, Bob does an excellent tutorial on. And once you know how to do that, you just need to play with it, experiment, find out what's stable for you. How important is the CPU while gaming? Is it true that GPU can underperform if coupled with the CPU that is limited in terms of power? Yeah, that is true. So if the CPU is, not performing well or it's way too low and the GPU is too high, you could potentially be CPU bottlenecked. It'll depend on the game and the workload or whatever you're running. But yeah, if the CPU is too weak and the GPU is, way more powerful, you could potentially be limiting the GPU there. As for how important the CPU is while gaming, for 1080p, I think it's actually quite important, at least in terms of clock speed. So when I did the i5 versus i7 comparison, the difference was actually pretty minimal, much less than I thought it would be. So it seems that a lot of the games, or at least the 15 games I regularly test, don't benefit too much going from the jump from 4 cores to 6 cores. So that might change in the future. Well, it probably will. But yeah, so the CPU is important, but I don't think the core count is making too big of a difference in many titles at the moment. Generally, if you get, I think most i5 laptops, they don't really seem to be paired with anything above a 2060 that I've seen, at least. Let me know if I'm wrong there. But I think like an i5 2060 is probably okay. I've never had that combination. I've had an i5 1660 Ti and that seemed to perform fine. I've only seen i7s with like 2070s and above, so that's probably why. And from what I've seen, that seems to keep the GPU fed pretty well without many issues. Also, is it better, longer lasting, to have 8-core CPU with 2060 or 6-core CPU with 2070? I think it depends what you're doing. Like I just mentioned, I didn't see much difference in the games I test today with 4 cores versus 6 cores. So 6 cores versus 8 cores, probably not really going to be that much of a difference. But if you do like other multi-core workloads outside of gaming, then that 8-core CPU might definitely be worth it. Otherwise, if it's for gaming, personally, I'd probably just go the 6-core with the 2070. What's your favorite overall gaming laptop? Which one do you recommend for casual gamers and why? So my go-to for like the $1,000 price point to like $1,200 US is generally the Acer Helios 300. It's tuned very well out of the box and just performs really good for the money. Otherwise, Lenovo Y540 is also pretty good. As I showed in my comparison video, it's possible to get that actually outperforming the Helios slightly because the Y540 lets you disable the Intel iGPU, and that can give you a boost in some games. So either one of those. It just depends on the price in your region. Like in America, I'm pretty sure the Helios is cheaper. Not by much, maybe $100 or so, I think. Here in Australia though, from memory, the Helios is like $500 more expensive than the Y540. So pretty easy recommendation here at least to go for the Y540, especially if you're willing to give it the GPU overclock and CPU undervolt that the Helios has out of the box, and then it'll be quite competitive. What is the best laptop for everything? Battery life, gaming, studying, editing? Personally for that, I'd be looking at something like Eluktronics Mag 15 or maybe Gigabyte Aero 15. Both of those have big batteries, good performance. Everything about they've just got like a good feature set, like SD card, Thunderbolt, mech keyboard in the case of the Mag, big batteries, I think I said that. But yeah, otherwise MSI GS66 back there, it's got a big battery too, 99.9 watt hours, also Thunderbolt, a lot of features. Some good options out there at the moment, but yeah, I'd probably be looking at one of those first two. Will you be able to get Zephyrus M15 this year? Last year I was looking forward to your review. That's the GU502, right? I think that's what it is. So for some reason the GU502 wasn't sold in Australia, and I asked ASUS for it, and they just said it's not sold in Australia, sorry. I would have thought they would have, maybe imported one or borrowed one from overseas or something, but I don't know, it just seems weird. Like Australia is only 4% of the people that actually watch the channel, so it seems weird to limit what they're going to send me based purely on that. So yeah, I don't know if the M15 is going to be sold here. I guess it'll depend on that. And if it's not sold here, then I might just have to try and ask a bit harder than last time and see what I can do. Hey man, I would like to know the duration of your thermal testing. I was actually thinking of doing like a blog post on this on the Jarrod'sTech website or something, because I don't actually document it anywhere. I mean, I've answered this question a few times when people ask it in the comments, but here we go. This is how I do my thermal testing. Basically, I get the laptop and I sit it on this white table against that wall, and I let it run idle for like an hour to begin with. That's what I do. So I get my idle temperatures first. So once it's been sitting there for an hour, I'll record the CPU and GPU temperatures. I'll film the keyboard deck with the thermal camera. And at the same time, I'll also use the sound meter I have and work out how loud it is. And then once I've got the idle results, I'll run my stress tests. So I'll get ASUS and Heaven benchmark running at the same time. And then at that point, usually I just forget about it for like an hour, minimum 30 minutes. Like I just let it get full heat soak, don't touch it at all. I'll just like turn back over here and work on something else and forget that it's even doing that. Once full heat soak has taken place, usually well within 30 minutes, I have hardware info open during this whole time. So I click the little stopwatch icon in hardware info and that resets the timer. And then I just let it go for another half an hour. So that's when I've actually begun my test. And then after half an hour, at whatever settings I'm running and whatever fan speed, then I'll come back and I'll do the same again, where I'll use the thermal camera on the keyboard and the sound meter tool to get the fan volume. And then I'll take the hardware info information down. So at that point, it's been 30 minutes to get full heat soak, then 30 minutes to get that data. Then I'll change the settings. So like I might adjust the fan or apply an undervolt or something, and then I'll let it go for another half an hour. So basically anytime on my temperature graph where I've got like a bar with the CPU and GPU, that's 30 minutes of testing. So if I've got like, a laptop with the fans in quiet mode, then normal mode, then turbo mode, then an undervolt, then a cooling pad, that I think I said 5 things there. So that would be 2.5 hours of stress tests. That's all while maintaining the ambient room temperature. I don't think you can see, but I got air conditioning put in a few months ago so I can keep the ambient room temperature the same during all of my testing, regardless of what time of the year it is. And once the stress tests are done, I get straight into the gaming tests, so I don't let the laptop cool down at all. So I take advantage of that full heat soak. And for the gaming tests, I only do 10 to 15 minutes per test run, and that's simply because it's a lot easier to do the stress tests for half an hour and work on something else. Doing half an hour for each game is a bit infeasible. And honestly, once I've done the stress testing first and I get into the games, I don't see any difference after like 10 or 15 minutes anyway. So I think that's perfectly fine. And that's basically how I do it. So that takes, a few hours for each laptop that I test, like 4 or 5 hours, easy, no problem. Depends on how many settings I want to test, all the fan options available. So generally I try to test as many as possible, so it can take the best part of most of a day to get that done. So this question is a bit confusing. I think there might be some confusion about what the overclocking is actually doing. So if you are overclocking, say your 1660 Ti here in this instance by 100 megahertz, and then also doing 350 megahertz, although the software might be reporting that it's running higher, you might find that it's not actually doing that. So you'll probably be power limit throttling the whole way, regardless of what overclock you put in place. Those clock speeds might not actually be getting hit, regardless of what the software says. So I would look at an actual benchmark of running a game and see if the FPS is actually up or not. Because more often than not, I've found that, you can boost the overclock pretty high, and the software is happy to be like, yeah, I'm running super high, but that's not actually the case at all. So that's mainly why I don't mess around with overclocks too often. Like I usually do one overclock test in my review, just with like some, like plus 150 megahertz on the core, 300 megahertz on the memory, I think is what I usually use. Because I think most can run that okay. But yeah, I haven't really played around too much with tuning it and setting different speeds in like MSI Afterburner. I don't think you're really going to be able to get the graphics running at the same on two different machines. Realistically, clock speed's going to come down to quite a few variables, whether that be like the cooling and how GPU boost works, or just even what game is running and where you are in that game and what's happening. I think there's just a lot of factors so that a comparison like this would be pretty difficult to do fairly. What are your expected performance for Ryzen 5 4600H? And will you be reviewing the Lenovo 5 AMD variant? As mentioned in an earlier question, yes, I'll be getting those Lenovos, although not actually sure if they're sending Intel or AMD at the moment. I'll try and ask for both. I mean, I want all of them. Whichever they don't send, I might just have to buy the others because it seems like a lot of people want to see those, so see what I can do there. I'm also confused about one thing where some YouTubers said Legion 5 comes with GTX 1660 Ti Max, but some said there is also a 2060 model. So that could vary by region. That's definitely happened in the past, where like one country might go to some graphics option and the other might be lower. In the press release, I'm pretty sure I did see RTX 2060 listed with the AMD variant. So some people were initially reporting 1650 Ti at the max, so maybe the press releases even differ by country. But yeah, I did see some screenshots showing RTX 2060 with AMD, so it looks like that's going to be happening, at least in some regions. As for the 4600H performance, yeah, really not sure about that. I really want to get it and test it and find out, especially to see how it compares against, say, the i7-9750H or even the 10750H, whatever that is. Great names. Based on what we've seen from the other Ryzen 4000 machines, I'm expecting probably better performance than the Intel counterparts. That just seems to be the way this generation's going. But yeah, really keen to see by how much that difference is. And, things like power draw, what the differences are there compared to Intel thermals, and, just how much performance you're getting per dollar. Upcoming Ryzen 4000 laptops. I'm guessing you're asking like what I've got coming here to test. Other than that A15 from Hardware Unboxed that I mentioned earlier, nothing at the moment is really locked in. There's just nothing, there's not much on the way. I'm not really sure why that is. Probably with the virus issues delaying things. But yeah, nothing is really confirmed at the moment. I think I mentioned before I might be getting the Ryzen 4000 MSI Bravo 15 late May, but that's still a while away. A lot of stuff could change by then. There's those Lenovo AMD laptops coming out in May, so if they don't send those, I might end up buying them myself. But yeah, other than those, I don't really have much planned at the moment, and that's just because no one's really reached out to be like, hey, we've got these new AMD laptops we want to send you. So I don't know if there's like a shortage or what the deal is. I'm still waiting to get the G14. I considered importing it from the US, but it was just like super expensive, so I didn't do that. So yeah, might just have to wait and see what we get. When will you review and test Eluktronics refresh with the 10th gen CPU? I hope Max 15 and Max 17 too. I'm excited for that. Honestly, it just depends if Eluktronics want to send those over. So it's probably pretty expensive for them to ship from the US to me just to review. So I would understand if they didn't want to send those. But, you know, if they offer them up, I'm more than happy to say yes. So it just depends whether or not they want to send them over. Could you make a video explaining all AMD CPUs? You know, like their capabilities, energy consumption, and other stuff like those. Please also make a comparison between AMD and Intel CPUs. I'm still new in those stuff, and Intel CPU are the only thing I know. Making a comparison will help me understand AMD CPUs better. So I definitely want to do a lot of comparisons. I've thought I've done a lot already. Honestly, I think I'm, just spamming comparisons at this point because I don't have that many laptops to review. I'm finally getting through the backlog of comparisons that I've wanted to make. And with all the new hardware coming out, there's even more comparisons to make. So there's unlimited comparisons for the time being. I do want to get more AMD CPUs so I can do that. Like I still haven't had any Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 laptops. Hopefully those will be coming soon and I can do some comparisons there. And yeah, I think it would be a good idea, like once I've gotten all the Ryzen CPUs, to do like one video and be like, here's how the 5 performs, here's the 7, here's the 9, that type of stuff. So yeah, I'll definitely consider doing that once I've had them all for testing. I know the toilets flush the opposite direction down there. Do fans spin backwards too? Yes, because they're upside down, so everything is the opposite. What is the percentage improvement we can expect from RGB lighting on performance? Over 9,000% minimum. OEMs aren't providing higher-end GPUs paired with Ryzen CPUs, not to mention poor corner cutting in models like the G14 and poor panels on the A15 highlighted by other laptop reviewers, Bob of All Trades and Own or Disown. Regarding Intel options, for the same price as A15, one could buy maybe a Helios 300, which has a better screen and probably better cooling than more expensive G15. What's your take on how OEMs are approaching Ryzen laptops? This seemingly budget to mid-range with no equivalent options at the high end. So it is pretty interesting. So I have actually heard from AMD that with Ryzen 4000, they're essentially targeting high volume laptops, so like the low to mid-range stuff. So from their perspective, from what I understood, it doesn't seem like they think there's anything funny going on in terms of like no laptops being paired with higher Nvidia graphics. Which I thought that was pretty interesting. I would have thought AMD might have said something different, but that wasn't the case. It sounds like we might be getting those higher end laptops later. And I kind of get it from these companies. Like if you're a company and you've made a Ryzen 3000 laptop that's honestly, let's face it, probably hasn't sold that well, and then Ryzen 4000 comes along, you probably, you might want to just dip your toe in a little and see what the market's like with, one or two laptops before going, full crazy. Here's our new lineup with all of these super expensive products that only, like 5% of the market's going to buy. So before jumping in and doing that, you probably want to test, the smaller or something that's probably going to sell, see what demand's like. And now that I think a lot of these companies have seen this big demand for Ryzen 4000, they're probably going to start creating some of those higher end enthusiast products. But it takes time. So I can kind of understand why they might, have started out slowly and then start ramping things up. That makes sense to me. At the same time, though, it also is a bit strange or interesting that not a single company has, paired like, say, a 2070 with a 4900H. I feel like if someone, just had the guts to do that initially, they would have had such a unique product that would have been basically unmatched for like value and performance for months. So yeah, it's interesting that it doesn't exist. But I have been looking into this, and from what I've personally heard, it doesn't sound like there's anything suspicious going on, like in terms of, Nvidia only saying high-end GPUs can only be Intel. I mean, something like that could be happening, but at least from what I've heard from AMD, it doesn't sound like they think that's happening. In the current market, are there any portable gaming laptops that don't thermal throttle? Had the GX502 and MSI GS65, and they both do. The GS66 also seems to have that same problem. So, my personal opinion is that a lot of people are way too sensitive when it comes to thermals. The GX502, I kind of understand, that is definitely a hot machine, especially if you've paired it with the 2070. That gets pretty hot. I mean, that's a lot of power in a thin package. I mean, it's kind of expected. GS65, I did test that, might have thermal throttled before like undervolting and boosting fan speeds. GS66 back here definitely did thermal throttle before making tweaks. Honestly, I think that's just how it's going to be. I mean, you might not want to hear that, but the fact is, if a company making a laptop has this product and there's thermal headroom available, they're not just going to cap it and let it run at 70 degrees. They're going to pump more power in, get more performance, make their product look better. It'll perform better in games. And, the internals might get hotter, but as long as it's not like on fire like the Dell G5 at 100 degrees, it's probably not going to be the end of the world. So I think a lot of people are just too sensitive at seeing 90 degrees and they think, oh my God, I don't want to pass 80 or 70 or whatever arbitrary number they've selected. So I don't think it's that bad. I mean, some laptops like Gigabyte have a 90 degree thermal limit. I think that's pretty fair. Realistically, you're probably only going to be hitting that during heavy multi-core workload, like with perhaps the CPU and GPU active. So it also comes down to what you're actually running. But I think thermal throttling, for the most part, isn't as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. I mean, obviously you want to try and get more performance, but, I think that's just how a lot of the products currently are. They run hot. It's not ideal. There are things we can do like undervolting, although that might be, getting taken away from us with 10th gen. But there are improvements that can be made, but at the same time, kinda is what it is. And if it doesn't thermal throttle, then it's probably going to be power limit throttling instead. So it's kind of like pick your poison, I guess. So maybe the power limit of the laptop that you're seeking is just kneecapped down so that it can't perform high and doesn't run hotter. I mean, is that what you're after? Do you want it to perform like worse because they've artificially capped it and it's not going to run as hot? I guess there are some laptops out there that have lower power limits. But yeah, personally, I would just take the slightly hotter machine, tune it a bit if possible, and take the better performance, but that's me. If I only game, no video editing, no Photoshop, no content creation as such, then will Intel i7 10th gen would be a deal breaker for me? Should I consider an AMD laptop solely for gaming? Will there be any difference in gaming between AMD and Intel chip even in the future? So I think I've kind of mentioned this in a previous question. I haven't had the chance to fairly compare an AMD laptop and an Intel laptop with the same GPU yet. I've talked to someone who has done preliminary testing there, and it sounds like so far the difference isn't actually that much. It seems like outside of gaming, AMD is like way ahead, but in actual games, they're actually, neck and neck, fairly close. So I'm still yet to see that myself because I haven't had them for testing. But yeah, from what I've heard, it's not all that different. So it'd probably come down to price differences. Like if there's an AMD laptop that's, if it's cheaper than an Intel option, then, that might be good. It also depends what products there are, because the fact is at the moment, there are just more laptops available with Intel CPUs. So for gaming, at the moment, it doesn't appear that it matters that much, but still keen to get in and test that for myself. Will companies finally put more work into their thermals now that undervolting is disabled? I really don't think it's going to change much, if anything. A lot of companies have already been resorting to all sorts of esoteric methods for quite a while now. Like, ASUS have started putting components behind the back of the screen. They've got the Zephyrus series, which lifts up the bottom. Companies starting putting vents above the keyboard. There's the Helios 300 with the keyboard that slides off to let things get cool. There's all sorts of crazy things like that, and I think all of these things have only really been necessary since Intel 8th gen when they went from 4 cores to 6 cores. So because the architecture's just been the same for so long, but they keep pumping up clock speeds, the only way to hit those speeds is with more power, and without any efficiency improvements, we're going to get more heat. So people are quick to blame companies for the reason these laptops are running hot. And that may be fair in some cases. I'm sure there are definitely some, chassis out there that is garbage compared to others. But at the same time, I recognize that there's only so much they can do in a confined space. And, that's basically it. A lot of them are already trying to do all sorts of unique things. And, that adds cost, especially with research and development to get all these weird techniques in to make them cooler. Yeah, I don't think it's really going to change much. And the fact that undervolting is locked in a lot of 10th gen models is a bit sad. I like with this GS66 back here, for instance, that you can the user does still have the option to enable undervolting, so by default it's locked, but at least you can still turn it on if you're happy to take those risks. Otherwise, it would be good to see companies instead move to allowing that through the BIOS perhaps. Might be a little more dangerous giving user access to that. So instead, I think what the GS66 does is a good option. Lets you just enable XTU through the BIOS, then you have that usual familiar software interface. So I think that would probably be, I hope that's what we see more of, that sort of thing. I think companies are already pushing what they can do in terms of improving thermals inside. I mean, there are obviously more things they can do, like say ASUS with their 10th gen, they're starting to do liquid metal, so others could get on board that bandwagon. But yeah, I think we're coming to a point where there's probably not that much they can do without like an architecture change that improves efficiency. And even when we get such a change, I'm still pretty sure, like I said before, if there's thermal headroom available, they're going to take advantage of it to get max performance. That's just the way it is. How do we know that the laptop has the Max-Q GPU variant in websites, since most of them don't mention it? That is a great question, and I really hate it when companies don't mention it. So they have gotten a lot better at doing this. It varies widely by company, but yeah, basically you really can't tell, and it sucks. It's crap. They should list if it's Max-Q or not. Otherwise, the best way is try and look up a review of the product. Hopefully the reviewer has mentioned whether or not it's Max-Q, ideally what power limit it runs at. So I mentioned that in all of my videos. Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. Try and find a good review for the product. Did you know that G14 screen has 40 millisecond delay? So I wanted to address this because a lot of people mentioned it ever since I did the G14 review. So I don't mention response times in my videos because I don't have the tools available to test that. And fact is, while testing 20 games on the G14, I thought it looked perfectly fine. You know, obviously that's subjective. Perhaps my eyes just aren't very sensitive to like ghosting and that kind of thing. So I wasn't able to find that out until everyone else's G14 reviews went, public at the same time as mine. And I saw like Notebook Check and stuff, they measured the response time and they showed that it was much higher than most other laptops. So that was how I found out about that. But obviously that meant I wasn't able to put it in my review. And it also pointed out to me, the fact that I can't, just looking at it isn't good enough. So I did actually recently spend $500 buying all of the hardware needed so that I can test screen response time. So I bought like an oscilloscope and a photo detector. So hopefully I can get that set up and I'll be able to do some proper gray-to-gray response time testing in future laptop reviews. 4900HS or i9 10th gen, which is best for video editing softwares like Premiere Pro? So I wanted to answer this because basically the landscape there is getting flipped on its head in a way. So a few weeks ago, I would have answered this question saying that the Intel option is better because you get QuickSync. I showed in my 4900HS versus 10875H video that the Intel chip does much better due to QuickSync. However, with Premiere 14.2, which is currently in beta, they add NVIDIA NVENC support, so you can use the NVENC encoder on the NVIDIA graphics card. Now, what that means is that basically QuickSync, I'm not sure if it gets used in addition to NVENC, but either way, from the benchmarks that I saw from Puget Systems, the NVENC encoder gives you a big performance boost compared to using QuickSync. So once that new version of Premiere is out, I'm not sure when it is, but it's in beta, so probably not too far away, I don't think the CPU is going to make anywhere near as much of a difference as it used to. If both of these options have 8 CPU cores, and they both have NVIDIA graphics paired with them, and can take advantage of NVENC, I think either would be a very compelling option, and they'll probably perform quite closely. So it's definitely a space to watch. It's currently evolving at the moment. Your videos are the best, Jared. Thanks. Is there any way to add VR performance on your laptop tests? So I do actually have a VR headset coming in soon, so I'm doing a video on that, and hopefully I get to keep that so I can use it to do future VR testing. I'm just waiting to get confirmation whether or not that'll be possible, but that's why I'm getting it in. I want to add VR testing to the laptop reviews, so hopefully I can get that and I can get set up with VR and add those benchmarks in. I'm working on it. Just wait and see. Does the new ASUS TUF A15 have FreeSync or G-Sync? It says adaptive sync, but what does that mean? Other reviewers seem to mention it, but never go into detail as to what adaptive sync is. It also seems that only select models of the A15 support the adaptive sync thing. So adaptive sync is basically just unbranded FreeSync or G-Sync. So same technology. I'm pretty sure every Ryzen 4000 laptop should be able to offer FreeSync. I mean, it would depend, but basically the way that works is you have the laptop screen and it's connected to the Vega GPU in the AMD processor, and then that might be connected to the Nvidia GPU or Radeon GPU if it has one, but it's that Vega iGPU connected to the screen that is able to do the FreeSync. So that's why you can have, like, say the A15 with Nvidia graphics, but the screen can still do FreeSync because it connects via the Vega graphics. So I don't think I've seen any Ryzen 4000 laptops yet that don't offer FreeSync, because that's just a really cool thing they're able to do with the Vega iGPU. If there was an AMD laptop that didn't use the Vega graphics and the screen was connected directly to Nvidia, I could see that as not having it. But outside of that, I would expect them to do FreeSync wherever possible. Which is your personal laptop, and which one do you think you'll shift to in the future? So I don't think you can really see it, but just off camera here is my Gigabyte Aero 15X, so I use that for video editing. Honestly, if I was going to change today, it's hard to say based on what I just mentioned about Premiere changing. QuickSync is going to be much less important with NVENC. So I could see myself getting an AMD-based laptop. It would just depend if any companies actually come out with an AMD-based laptop that has the things I need. So good screen, SD card reader, big battery. At the moment, there's not really like a AMD laptop for creators type of thing. So if I wanted something right now, I'd probably either be looking at the new OLED Aero 15 with an 8-core Intel CPU, or maybe Eluktronics Mag 15, because I really like that. It's got a similar feature set. No OLED screen though, which is unfortunate, but still overall good machine, good features. So yeah, if I needed something today, probably those. Otherwise, hopefully my Aero 15X doesn't, it lasts for a while longer and I can hold out and get a nice AMD creator laptop. It'd be interesting to see if something like that exists. With Intel disabling undervolting with their 10th gen, will AMD finally allow undervolting? So I talked about this in a previous Q&A video with Tim at Hardware Unboxed. AMD basically said undervolting, it's possible, someone just needs to make the software to do it, and it doesn't seem like they are willing to provide that. At the same time, AMD also said their chips are, tuned very well in terms of the power curve, so you might not get as much performance out of being able to undervolt an AMD CPU compared to Intel. That's just a guess based on what AMD said. But yeah, it's interesting that Intel are having to lock that. So if someone comes around and does software for the AMD side, and then suddenly AMD can do that, and then the roles reversed, well, it'll be interesting. Let's put it that way. Given we have 300Hz displays now, do you think it's feasible for you to start measuring total input latency, maybe with a 1000 FPS camera or something similar? So that kind of is tied into what I mentioned earlier with the response time testing. So I'll definitely be adding response time testing. In terms of a 1000 FPS camera, like it's not even close the amount of granularity the tools I've bought can test. Like they test in like the nanosecond range, and 1000 FPS is just like nowhere near that. So that's good for testing the screen response time, but that wouldn't really be useful for me to test the total input latency. So say from the moment you click on the touchpad and something happens on the screen. So I'm not sure how I would do something like that. 1000 FPS camera might be okay to get a rough estimate, but yeah, not sure how I'd be doing that. For now, let's just wait till I get up and running with the response time testing, and then from there I'll see if I want to introduce total input latency as well. Well, that's the end of the questions, or at least the ones I'm going to get through on this video, unfortunately. There were over 200 questions, and I've already been filming for an hour. I think I've addressed the top upvoted ones, so hopefully you guys found this video interesting. Let me know if you have further questions, leave them on the video, and I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next month.